Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm so excited to be joined by not one, but two very special guests today. Mark and Addie are here. Welcome to the show, both of you.
What a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I have a lot to learn. We're going to talk about some things that I've never really even heard about before. And I know my audience hasn't. So really looking forward to continuing this conversation, especially in the realm of psychedelics, which you both know I'm very passionate about and my audience knows as well. So let's start off perhaps, Mark, I'm wondering if maybe you could provide us with an overview of sort of what's going on currently with the state of psychedelic research, and especially maybe within the lens of like the health and wellness industry.
Well, these are exciting times in the world of psychedelic research because after many decades, the tree is starting to bear fruit. So this year, today is May of 2024. This year of August of 2024, specifically August 11th, the FDA in the United States has to pronounce a ruling as to whether MDMA will be legalized through a doctor's prescription pad, which is exciting. This is the first one. After many decades of research with lots of different psychedelics, MDMA is the front runner. And it's this year that they will have to announce whether it will be legalized. It's not quite that simple because the FDA makes the first statement, then the DEA in the States has to recategorize MDMA. If there's a yes response from the FDA, the DEA has to recategorize from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And then all the different states have to step up, and colleges of physicians and surgeons have to specify how MDMA would be made available within the context of the wisdom of the college. So this is exciting. MDMA is the first one, but there are other ones coming down the pipe. Psilocybin for depression, psilocybin for end-of-life anxiety. So we're all holding on to our chairs tightly to see what happens.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing a little bit. That's exciting. I didn't know that was coming, and so many changes. Must be amazing. I mean, for both of you, I'm assuming haven't been in this industry for quite a while, and really the work that you've all been doing to really push this forward and make change. I mean, how beautiful to see some things hopefully coming into fruition and hopefully shifting. And yeah, incredible. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, Mark, but just to add to that, this conversation already is the current legal landscape for psychedelics. I know a lot of my listeners are curious, like, isn't all of this illegal? How do we access this? There's a lot of questions about that. And I know you're talking about MDMA, but the change in even legality, like what will be the implications on research and even therapeutic use and other uses for these substances?
Well, the legal landscape is complicated. What I just mentioned is the process of bringing it into the doctor's prescription pad, which is full medical legalization. But there are other threads in this particular blanket. There's a decrim movement throughout actually North America, various states, and in British Columbia, we have a decrim movement, which takes drugs out of the law, and that allows them to be used in different ways because they're not criminalized. Oregon in the States has a legalization of psilocybin services, which is another legal structure. In Canada, you can access psychedelics legally through a process called the SAP, or Special Access Program, which is sort of parallel to the clinical trial research wing. And the underground is ever present. The underground therapists of the world are blossoming. So the legal landscape is a lot more complicated than just the stage 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials that allow doctors to prescribe it.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt that's a very complicated conversation, right? There's so many levels. And I know a lot of my listeners are in the States or even different countries. And of course, every state, every country, has different pieces unfolding for sure. Yeah. So, Addie, I'm curious if maybe you could speak to like what do you see as some of the potential challenges, maybe in integrating psychedelics into mainstream wellness? Like, what are some of the challenges that may arise when MDMA is being able to be written as a prescription, or these pieces come more to the forefront?
So I'll speak about it more generally in how we look on psychedelic as general, not specifically to MDMA, because I think that we see that there's an increased prevalence of psychedelic use. We understand the therapeutic potential of psychedelics and the unique cultural and historical context in which psychedelics are placed. So it's important that mental health providers have an understanding of the unique motivations, experience, and needs of people who use them. I also believe that we need to shift away from assessment that is limited to problematic outcomes of psychedelic use, anti-absence based addiction treatments patterns, and really look at it as to acknowledge the great potential of psychedelics, destigmatize, as Mark mentioned, and accept the fact that psychedelic will most probably become, I hope, a common treatment. And I also believe that with the increasing interest in psychedelics, particularly for psychotherapeutic purposes, we need to prepare to navigate and facilitate psychedelic experience. It is very important in order to retain benefits and work through psychedelic experiences.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine, right? There's this big, and I can even see it in the work that I'm doing in the underground. The risk we run in making sure that people who are holding this space or doing this work actually understand the medicine, actually maybe even experienced it themselves, and have a reference for like how to do this work, right? And I would imagine, as soon as MDMA is able to be prescribed by a doctor, I mean, the doctors haven't done it, right? They haven't experienced it. Maybe they don't even fully understand, the the risks, or all these complications for sure come in when there's something new
Right.
that we're bringing into. Yeah.
Right.
How do we navigate that? What do you feel is the best way to to really, like, do we need obviously like maybe legislation, or I mean there has to be some sort of rule book somewhere, and who's going to be in charge of that?
Well, that's a big question. I believe it's a combination of legislation, of making sure that trained people are the one that give the treatments. I think that I believe in education and more education and more education. I also believe in evidence. So obviously we need evidence for each and every substance, and we also need to remember that there's a great potential on one hand, but we need to be extra careful because there can be misuse and overuse. So I really believe in taking baby steps, educating both the physician, the one that gives the treatment, also the patients, and really but to be open for this field and really accept it, and this is something that we see. I'm in this field not for very long, since 2020, end of 2020, and you see openness. You see openness, and when I say openness, I mean mostly from researchers, from physicians, from regulatory bodies, something that we didn't experience before. I don't know, before that. So I'm very optimistic, but together with being very optimistic, I think we need to take baby steps, be very careful, and make sure that we get to see all the potential of psychedelics.
Yeah, beautifully said. That makes a lot of sense, right? To go slow. And I could see like the world we live in is all about fast pace too, right? Here's this new thing. Let's get it out there. Let's do it. Everybody should have MDMA, right? And that might be one of those risks that come up, right? And I appreciate you saying that. Like, let's go slow. Let's learn together. Let's train. There's no rush here. We've got time. Obviously this movement's been building for decades, right? So let's keep that that, being responsible with it, right? And making sure that
Exactly.
it's being safely handled. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
So you mentioned a little bit about this openness that you're seeing with doctors and people, and I'm wondering, if Mark, you have anything to add here too. But I'm curious, like, how have you both seen perceptions around psychedelics, really change over the years? I know I have my own personal journey with that back in the day, thinking, oh, it's drugs, I'm not allowed to do that, that's bad stuff, and now obviously seeing it in such a different light and having my own like life altering experiences. What are you seeing in terms of even just like mainstream humanity and obviously, in different industries?
I'd like to apologize. I have a fire alarm going off in the background. Is that
I was wondering
intrusive?
who that was.
That's me. Hopefully, the person will solve it. Um,
Hopefully there's no fire. We'll keep a lookout for
no, there
smoke
isn't.
behind you.
I'm just going to turn off my microphone and come back and answer that question.
Okay, great. Yeah, maybe Addie can jump in while
Yeah,
Mark steps
sure.
out.
So I'm kind of new to the field, let's say 3-4 years, but I come from cannabinoids or cannabis industry, not cannabis, cannabinoids, because I always been in pharmaceutical industry, and I can and there's huge difference. I know how physicians, when I introduce them technologies that I developed in the past, how they looked at cannabinoids and cannabis, how they they very the stigma was huge. I mean, everyone said, "Oh, a patient that comes to my office and asks for a prescription because he wants to smoke it is just a recreational for recreational purposes. It's not medicinal. It's not nothing." And with I did not experience such a feedback when I spoke to physicians, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at our company presentation, but you can see that on our scientific advisory board. We have, the best people from all the big universities around the world, and this is because every person that I contact and I introduce the company and introduce the compound, they were so anxious to learn more. And the immediate response was, yes, I'd be happy to join your scientific advisory board because of two reasons. One, for mental health disorders, there's really nothing out there. Nothing has changed for decades. So we really want to find something that can help our patients. On the other hand, when you develop psychedelics, the big advantage is that it can be an innovative compound to the pharmaceutical industry, but someone has tried it. And in our case, thousands of people have tried it before we became a company and started our FDA voyage, if you will. But we have testimonials for people who tried it and say that it was effective and safe. So they had this testimonials. They read the very minimal literature there's on MEI because it's an innovative compound, and they were so thrilled with the potential. And they had Mark. That Mark joined the company because of his own experience, and I'm saying it because Mark said it on many occasions. So it's completely different. And I think that the main reason why it's completely different, besides the fact that there's nothing out there for mental health disorders, but because psychedelics comes with trials, comes with learning, comes with. It's not like cannabis that came from. It's there are very little until today, even though cannabis is something that people have used for ages for sure, but also medical cannabis is something that we have been hearing about for at least, I don't know, 20 years or so. But there are very few clinical trials that have been conducted on medical cannabis to show the efficacy of medical cannabis. In psychedelics, it's just the other way around. There are many clinical trials, and the amount is continuously growing, showing the good potential of psychedelics. And when you go to a physician, when you go to a regulator, they want to see evidence. And fortunately enough, we have evidence. So this is why I'm saying that I see openness
Yeah.
towards
Yeah.
treatment with psychedelics.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Right. I mean, the more research we can have behind it, the more proof, right? I mean, we live in a world that we
Right.
need that, right? Especially for legal reasons. So that's really wonderful. Yeah. What about you, Mark? What do you see evolving in terms of just the common, conceptions of psychedelics?
Well, what I see is changing public opinion, like dramatically changing public opinion. The forces that are shifting what we see through the lens of polls is that MDMA is the front runner, and they've been very, very skillful about getting lots of media attention. And one of the things that they've done well is they treat veterans in the States. And veterans have a huge amount of public sympathy. So people really appreciate the sacrifices that veterans have made, and often they come back with PTSD. And so when veterans start speaking out about the benefits of psychedelics, it makes a difference to public opinion. It's curious, if you look at, there's a rather amazing website out there that most people haven't heard of. It's called clinicaltrials.gov, where everybody that's doing a piece of science, everybody who's running a clinical trial has to register, and you can go in and see who is doing what. If you plug the words MDMA, or the letters MDMA, into clinicaltrials.gov, you can see that there's 148 studies that are active with MDMA. If you do the same with psilocybin, there's 183. If you plug the word psychedelic in there, there's 563. And if you plug the word ketamine, there's over 1,500. So there's an explosion of research interest in the world of psychedelics, which is nothing but good. It helps bring new medicines, new treatments to often things that have been very, very hard for us to treat. MEI is just one example of many different psychedelics that are being researched for a wide range of disorders, from PTSD to depression to addiction issues to obesity to a variety of different mood disorders. Yeah, psychedelics are changing the research landscape.
Yeah, and the public perception is changing. And I sometimes wonder if it's just the little world that I live in, right, where everybody I hang out with, knows about it and is in that world. But I see that mainstream as well with my clients, and even people listening to my podcast, being, wow, I'm starting to hear about this, and interesting, like fascinating pieces here. Yeah. So you've both mentioned MEAI a little bit, and I want to dive into this because I know that this is what you work with at Clearmind Medicine, and it's something I know nothing about. So would really love if, one or both of you, whoever wants to take the lead on that, could explain what is MEAI, and has it been around for a while? Is this a brand new piece? And why is it considered, possibly so cutting edge, in the field, especially around health and wellness? I know you've both mentioned mental health a few times, so would love to just dive in and start learning about this.
Do you want me to start, Nadie, or would you like
exactly.
to?
I wanted to. Do you want to start, and I will finish?
Sure. Okay. So MEI was invented by an underground therapist and then sold for a while on the underground. And then there was a discussion that happened about having an anti-addictive properties. And the folks at Clearmind Medicine noticed that and decided to bring it into the legal world and created some patents around it. And a company was formed. And I've actually tried it myself, to be completely honest. And it's a really interesting experience. The best way that I've ever described it is, if you imagine, actually, when you take one dose, it feels pleasant, mildly pleasant, not dramatic, but pleasant. If you take a second dose, it's a bit like a couple of beers, just a very mild, euphoric, pleasant experience. If you keep taking it, like you take a third dose or a fourth dose, there's a very dramatic and strange shift that happens. And the best way that I've ever described that is, imagine that you've just finished eating 2 pieces of chocolate-covered goopy cheesecake, and somebody puts a third piece of cheesecake in front of you. You can't imagine touching the cheesecake. It's just completely repulsive. And yet, if you think about why you can't touch the cheesecake, it's not because you're so stimulated you're hanging off the ceiling. It's not because you're so sedated you're lying on the floor. It's not because you're so violently ill you're kneeling in front of the toilet. It's just you're satiated. You're done. You're finished. And MEI gives some people that same experience. Now, I've worked in the addiction services world for years, and that was my first career. I got close to 3 decades in that world. And if you think about the options, AA, yes, that helps many people. Counseling can be helpful. Naltrexone antabuse that makes you violently ill, or camprosate, are all various options, but there's nothing that you could take that you actually enjoy. It has a positive experience. It's not a wonderful experience. It's not exciting and fabulous. If it was exciting and fabulous and wonderful, people would become addicted to it very quickly. It isn't that at all. It's a pleasant experience, but then it has this odd satiation effect where you simply want to stop, which is unique. And I think it offers the whole world of addictions treatment something completely different. And that's why the Clearmind Medicine company got formed, is because of this this observation of this unique molecule that's been floating around for not too long, but a while, and the growing internet discussion about its anti-addictive qualities. So we're taking it from the underground and turning it into the legal and doing clinical trials and doing the whole stage 1, 2, 3 clinical trials that are needed to turn it into a medicine.
Yeah. Wow.
The reason why I wanted Mark to start speaking about it and then to come in is because exactly where he stops is where Clearmind came into the picture, because we knew those testimonials, we knew the person that invented the molecule. We heard about people that have tried it and how they felt after they had MEI, and we thought, well, there's a treatment. There's a treatment for alcoholism, something that's out of all substance addictions, that's the substance that people are most addicted to, which is quite understandable because it's legal. There aren't very good treatments like Mark just mentioned, but we have those testimonials that are very strong. People have said that they dramatically and immediately decrease the amount of alcohol they usually consume. As Mark mentioned, it wasn't very pleasant because you don't want it to be rewarding. You don't want to, replace one addiction with another. And it didn't last for long. I mean, when you're starting to think about something that can be widely available, a drug, not underground treatment, but something that will be available for billions of people, essentially. That's the goal. You want it to be as safe as possible. You want it to be as effective as possible. And everything that Mark just mentioned, this is exactly what you're looking for when you start a development. And this is why we decided to at the time we bought the global rights for the patents, and we started an FDA route, which we believe that's the main route that you should take. But in the same time, we wanted to see, well, if it's so effective, at least according to testimonials, it's so effective for alcoholism, maybe other addictions, maybe it will be effective for other addictions as well. So we looked at cocaine. We saw, yes, it's very effective, and this is something unbelievable almost, because there is no dedicated treatment for cocaine addiction. And we also look at food, but that's something that we may expand a little bit later. But we started to look at additional addictions because of the way that we believe MEA works, and we found it to be effective in other addictions as well. So yes, we are very excited, and we are just about to start our first clinical trial. And we really, I mean, me as a person who always worked in pharma, my goal in life is to bring treatments to people that are effective and safe and can change their life. And I believe that MEI has the potential to be such a treatment.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, this is really exciting. Really, really, really neat. And I appreciate both of you speaking to it, because I can see this, and I'm glad you did mention the food piece, because that's, of course, where my fascination of my audience would be like, wow, this could be something that helps me, right? In the sugar addiction space, especially knowing now, how sugar activates our brain, similar to cocaine, and how addictive that is, just specifically processed food in general, right? Highly palatable food. And, if we do have that, I love that analogy you used, Mark, of having all the cheesecake and then having one more piece offered to you, right? I think that really resonates with my audience. Like, oh, okay, I would probably stop at that point, and to be able to have that part of the brain. And I'm curious, like, if you can, I know I'm not very scientific and my audience isn't either, but, what have you found is it actually like doing to your brain? Is it turning off certain receptors in your brain, or like what is the actual chemical reaction that's taking place when you ingest it?
So I'll give you the non-scientific response to that, and then
Great.
Adi can give you the scientific response to that. So what you've actually asked is a mechanism of action question. And it's curious because when you're taking a molecule and turning it into a medicine, you need to prove that it's safe, and you need to prove that it's effective. And everybody speculates about mechanism of action, but really we don't know. A mechanism of action is largely speculative. And even some of the things that we do about neurotransmitters that we think, and you hear researchers making very solid pronouncements about, it's still pretty vague when you really look at brain chemistry. So my belief, and Adi will have a different belief, is that we actually don't know, and that we may never know. In fact, I don't even think that we really know how aspirin works. And we don't need to. We need to know that it's safe, and we need to know that it works. And the whole mechanism of action piece, that piece in the middle, is often a complete mystery to us.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we do have some science, and I'm sure Adi is able to reflect on that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, or fortunately, Mark is right. And fortunately, I'm saying because he's right. We don't know yet how it works. We have some signs because we are looking into it, but it's not as easy as it may sound. We know that it has to do with neurotransmitters. We know that it affects serotonin. We know that it affects dopamine. The exact way we still don't know. We're still learning it. I can tell you, and you asked about whether there's a switch going off. From people who spoke about MEI, they spoke just on the opposite, like a switch going on, telling you, you are good, you are satisfied, you don't need anything else. And it comes to what you mentioned about your audience, that maybe sometimes someone will offer them another portion of cheesecake, and they will understand that maybe they shouldn't have another piece because they had enough. But it's something that comes from understanding that maybe that's not the best thing to have now. I think the beauty in MEI is that people said that it wasn't something that they took, a decision they took because they knew it's another glass of alcohol is not good for them, because they need to drive, because they are working together, whatever reasons you have. And there are so many reasons why not to do something. It didn't come from why not to do it. It came because they didn't feel the need to have another glass of alcohol. They were satiated. They were fine. They didn't need anything else. And I think that's the beauty, because if you develop something that comes with understanding that you have to react in a certain way in order to maintain health, to maintain sobriety, whatever you want to maintain, it has a potential, but it comes, we know humankind. I know myself, okay? If I could just lay on the sofa and didn't move and look the way I want to look, I wouldn't even have a gym, a sneakers. I wouldn't go to, health club. I don't like to do any. I don't very much like to do any sports activity, but I'm doing it because I know it's good for my health. I know I want to look in a certain way. But we know that if we have the option, we'll just stay. We'll stay on the sofa and watch TV and eat a cheesecake probably. With MEI, so what I want to say, when you know that you need to do something in order to gain something, not always you're going to do it. But if your brain telling you you're okay, you don't need anything else, you're good, then the odds that the treatment at the end of the day will be successful are higher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate both of your, like, the viewpoint on this. And what's coming up for me is an old mentor of mine used to say, leave a margin for magic, right? Like, there's parts of this that we're never going to really understand,
Yeah.
right? And we're
Yes.
never really going to know how exactly what it's doing all the time, right? And we need to also have this ability to trust, right? Trust in something bigger, trust in, like, and obviously having the proof behind it of see how effective it is, see it does work, like you said, Mark, right? But I love adding that we got to sprinkle in some magic here. We're talking about psychedelics, right? So there has to be some space for just total trust and surrender, and like, as long as we feel it is safe, right? And we have that research behind it. So this sounds like it really
yes.
is. Yeah. That's a good one, right? It just came to me as you were talking. Yes. So you've both mentioned at different times the mental health component. So I'm curious, I know we've talked a bit about addiction, but what are you seeing in terms of the effectiveness of MEI addressing like mental health conditions, and which ones are you maybe studying or seeing sort of some shifts with?
Well, it might be interesting just to reflect on what we've seen through the research lens. And starting with the obesity researcher. So we found a guy who only works with really, really fat rodents. That's what he does. That's his living. If you have a molecule you think would be helpful for obesity, you give it to him and he'll tell you what he thinks. And so he tests many molecules over many years. And so we talked to him, we asked him to comment on, what he thought, and he did all the tests on MEI. And we saw his data, but we also had an informal conversation. I said, what do you think? What do you think about this molecule? And he said he'd never seen anything like it. And I found that a fascinating response. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, if you give crystal meth or cocaine or something like that to a rat or a mouse, it'll lose weight, but you're not going to have a normal mouse at the end. And so he tested all kinds of things. He tested movement. He had a very complicated way of looking at how the rats and mice were moving. He looked at body fat and where it was distributed. He looked at lean muscle mass. He did this complete analysis. And you can make a rodent lose weight in lots of different ways, but they're not normal at the end. In fact, they're completely messed up. Right. What he said is MEI is a normalizing agent. What he saw at the end was a rodent that was normal, which is, I think, absolutely fascinating. There's something about this thing, this molecule, and again, your mechanism of action speculation is what I'm doing here. It's got something to do with homeostasis, and I don't really understand how that works. But the body, as you know, is always in thousands of different ways achieving this balance between lots of different things. In order for us to be sane and healthy, we're constantly measuring, our bodies are internally measuring things and trying to achieve homeostasis. Balance is what we're always trying to achieve in many different systems. And MEI seems to have something to do with that, because the mice at the end of this were actually normal, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And he'd never seen that before. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. I want to add to that because, I know a lot of my listeners or a lot of people, especially, again, bringing this into sort of the food conversation and the health, we think about gaining weight as well, I'm just eating too much, and losing weight as well, I just need to starve myself, cut calories, right? Which I hope nobody's doing anymore, but, just totally starving. And when we do that, we're going to lose all of our muscle mass. We're going to lose, we're going to have some major kidney issues and some liver issues. And so that's really fascinating what you're saying, right? Is there's healthy ways to lose weight, and there's ways that we can absolutely starve ourselves and lose weight, right? And, all sorts of other ways. Of course, we could maybe do cocaine and lose weight, right? Or start smoking and lose weight, but it's going to cause other challenges and not necessarily be healthy in the long run. So yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Did you want
to
add
curious
anything?
As well, just a final thought before Adi jumps in, is also their movements were normal. Now, that may sound like a trivial thing, but if you stimulate a rodent, its movements are not normal. Its movements are frenetic. If you starve a rodent, its movements are not normal. So movement and how a rodent moves is actually really important, because to some extent movement is about play and chasing other rodents and just kind of having fun. And so there's this whole analysis of movements. that I thought was, I'd never thought about that before, but their movements became normal, which tells you a lot about, how the rodent is experiencing the world. Because movement is the most obvious thing. All the autopsy stuff you can also look at, but I thought the movement thing was fascinating.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
when we feel good, we'll move naturally, right? Like if there's an internal feeling of like, I feel good, I feel healthy, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be able to move around and play and jump and
Be active. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And another aspect that we're looking at, because we're looking mostly currently in addictions, and which is also a mental health problem, but because many times underlying problem to addiction is depression, we're also looking at depression. So,
Okay, so what are you
actually,
seeing there with depression? Like, what are you
so
noticing?
I can only say from preclinical studies what we saw, that just like Mark mentioned, you have special tests to see whether an animal is depressed or anxious, and we didn't find any of that. So very positive preclinical results. People who tried it, they didn't try it because they were depressed. So we just actually, when I'm speaking, I remember that we have one testimonial of someone who treated her father, actually, who was an alcoholist for many, many years, and she said that he was also depressed, and after he took MEI, his depression was much, much better. So we are very optimistic. But I can tell you from when we developed our clinical trial protocol, we did it with top psychiatrists, and one of the psychiatrists told me, if you're going to be successful, I will treat people for depression because the underlying reason for alcoholism is most of the time depression. So immediately we added a depression signal as an endpoint to the study, and we are definitely going to look it up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. Definitely a huge area there, right? And we're seeing that, depression and even anxiety and, a lot of these mental health challenges become so prevalent. And, this reliance on antidepressants, which, everybody has their own opinion about. We're not going to get down that rabbit hole, but very neat to see that there might be some other options. And what are you seeing? I guess I'm thinking of my audience, and what they might be curious about now is like, what are you seeing in terms of like any long-term effects? It might be too soon to tell. There's this new molecule. Is there any harmful long-term effects? Like, are there any downsides that you're seeing as well on maybe a physical or mental, plane? Or is it too soon to tell? You're still, we're very much in the early stages of testing all of this and seeing, how things unfold over time.
So it's definitely too soon, but going back to what I said about baby steps and being very, very cautious when you develop any kind of treatment, actually, not just psychedelics, is really to continue learning while you're developing the drugs. And what I mean is that how it goes with FDA is that, for instance, if I want to give a treatment for 28 days, for people, I need to test it for at least 28 days on comparable animals. So the longest treatment that we have done for animals was for 28 days, and I think that we did something like good 3 to 5 studies for 28 days where animals received a daily treatment of MEI in multiple doses, because we also want to learn about doses. And we didn't, it is a treatment that it is dose dependent. So in the dose that we aim to treat people with, we didn't see any long-term adverse events, but it's only 28 days. I can tell you that now we started a 90 days treatment, and we are going to learn more and more about it. So from what we have done until now, we didn't see any long-term effect, but we are still learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also we look at the anecdotal. We look at what we know just through the lens of discussions out there, and MEI is one molecule that's in the aminoindane group of molecules. And they've actually been around for quite a while, and they've been actually used by many people. And what we can see through the lens of just historical use is that they appear to be safe. Appear is the key word in that sentence, but we don't have any safety risks that we're flagging right now that we're concerned about. We have to go through the normal clinical trial research and prove that it's safe, but we're not particularly concerned about anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great news. Hopefully it stays that way. Yes. Over time. And Addie, you mentioned something that actually brought up another question for me is what are your intentions with like what this treatment looks like? Is the goal sort of to have, or what are you seeing sort of a 28-day treatment of daily doses and then no need for it ever again? Like, is this sort of or is it an ongoing, lifelong, someone who's an alcoholic or struggles with another addiction? Like, is it something that you're seeing could be this short, like 1 month healing journey and then they're good after that? I don't want to use the word cured because that's not a word we should use, right? But like, what are you noticing there? Are you going to suspect it's more of sort of a long-term treatment plan?
That's a great question that I don't have an answer yet. Or I can tell you that definitely it's going to be a chronic treatment for a period of time. At this point, I cannot tell you whether a period of time is 1 month, 3 months, 12 months, 3 years, or lifetime, or whenever. If I'm speaking about alcoholism, it's whenever you feel like you may be, you have the urge to drink alcohol beverage, you will take MEI as a precaution. I can tell you from what we saw in animals or from testimonials that the half-life of MEI is not very long, which is actually an advantage because it makes it safer. Yeah. So, but it comes also with the fact that you will need to take it not only once, twice during your lifetime. I do hope that, as people will hopefully get sober with the treatment, they will be more open to really treat the underlying reason that drove them to be alcoholic in the first place. So that may be the I don't know, addict people, they will never be cured, but it will be the addiction will be under control. So maybe that will be the key that will help them solve whatever problem they have. I really don't know, but it's a very interesting topic that we are still looking at, and hopefully with time we will have more answers.
It's also curious, building on what Adi just said, is most psychedelic research has been about providing very, very intense, dramatic, often spiritual or meaningful experiences for people in a very short period of time, 1, 2, or 3 doses, and having transformation experiences. There's pros and cons to that. The pros being it's very, very impactful. The con is it's really, really expensive. You have to have therapists. You have to have a lot of preparation for the experience. You have to have a lot of integration for the experience. It's a very brief but intense and expensive period of people's lives. The model for MEI is completely different. It's just basically the idea is you go to your physician and say, I have this concern, and it could be an eating disorder, it could be alcoholism, it could be cocaine addiction. And you say, I have this problem. Can I try this? And if the answer is yes, then you take it home and you use it as required. So it's we have 2 sort of models that we're discussing internally using the example of alcoholism. One is because it does feel kind of pleasant. You could actually take it as an alternate to alcohol and not drink at all. But the other is if you just absolutely love your gin or your red wine or whatever it is, then you add it to that and then have the experience with the alcohol, and then you stop drinking because of the MEI. So there's sort of 2 somewhat different models that we've been discussing internally, and both have legitimacy.
Yeah. I just want to add to both your question and also Mark's comment, and look at also from another angle. I mean, really taking you into the process when we sit down and we think how we want the treatment to look like at the end. And one thing that we made as a rule, if you will, that we want to develop something that it will be easy to take, it will be available, it won't be expensive, it will be accessible. And this is why we develop MEI as an oral treatment, something that you can take like any other pill. You can take it in the privacy of your own home, so no one needs to know what it is that you're using if you're afraid of stigma. And because we really made a lot of efforts for the manufacturing process of the pharmaceutical ingredient to be as inexpensive as possible, so we can really introduce to the patient something that is, as I said, affordable, accessible, and this is how we develop MEI. And I think it's very important. I mean, for me, it needs to be safe, it needs to be effective, and it needs to be accessible.
Yeah, that is really big, right, and really fascinating, right? When you think of anyone who's really addicted to things, they don't have thousands of dollars to spend necessarily on an ayahuasca journey or a psilocybin journey, or that can be really challenging for most of society, right? So to have that be accessible, I think that's massive. I think that's one of the reasons why we're all, so many people are eating such junk food, because it's cheaper than actually eating real food. Like our real food now costs more than fake food, and it's going to drive our demand, right? And of course, I'm going to eat at McDonald's for $5 versus having to cook a meal for $15 or $20, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this is brilliant. As we start wrapping things up, I see my audience wondering then how can people get involved with, specifically what you guys are doing at Clearmind Medicine? How can someone maybe even get access to these treatments or experiments? You're doing clinical trials, are you accepting patients? Like, what's that process look like for anyone who's maybe curious to get involved?
So we are just starting the clinical trials. We haven't started enrollment yet. We are going to have, at least at the beginning of the study, because it's not a very large study, we're going to have 2 sites in the United States and 1 site in Israel. And people are welcome to look at our website and see where the clinic. I can tell you where the clinical sites are. So we're going to have the clinical site at Yale University, Connecticut, and Johns Hopkins. Yes. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Wow. And people who meet the criteria and would like to join the studies are welcome to join.
And they can find that information on your website, which of course I'll put in the show notes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, this has been incredible. I'm curious, as we wrap things up, is there any final pieces that either of you want to add around this? I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but of course we do have to end it sometime. So any final pieces that we didn't cover that you feel are really important for everybody to know?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, please go ahead, Matt.
Well, it's interesting for me just to look at my own career, because I worked in the addiction services for close to 30 years. And there was this ongoing sense of frustration because, I had fabulous staff, highly trained, compassionate, skilled counselors, nurse, and a physician who were absolutely dedicated. And yet what we offered people was pretty minimal. We helped people, but it was never dramatic. It was never as helpful as it could be. Every time that I offered somebody antabuse, for example, they never came back a second time, ever. It was nobody would ever do that twice. And so the idea of actually having effective, available, accessible tools that work is actually quite dramatic in the world of addictions, because so far there isn't much. And so we as a whole society need better tools, and these kind of research initiatives are actually absolutely required to help people like addictions therapists, nurses, and physicians to actually be more effective at what they do.
Me coming from, I've been always in the pharmaceutical industry, always, the goal, as I said, to bring good treatments to the market. I'm very excited. When I joined Clearmind, it opened my mind, literally. And so it's very exciting times for sure. And I just want, because I said something during the interview that I didn't return to. I said that I will expand a little bit more about what we found in the obesity study. And I think that's very important, because we have now, for the first time, I think, a very good options, pharmaceutical options to treat obesity. But I still believe that MEI brings something slightly different, because what we saw, and this is something that we didn't mention, is that mice that were obese mice, and when we started the treatment, we did not limit the amount of a high-fat diet that they could consume, and so they ate a lot. They didn't like you said, they didn't count calories. They ate as much as they wanted, but they lost 20% of their body weight, and they lost. And the weight loss was on the expense of fat tissue, which is exactly the tissue that you want to lose when you lose weight. And they were as active as slim, normal mice, I will call them for the sake of conversation. They weren't depressed, they weren't anxious, they were normalized. The entire, obesity comes with metabolic disorders like fatty liver and high cholesterol and stuff like that. It was normalized. So going back to the sofa I want to stay on and not going to the gym, potentially, or at least what we saw until now, this is exactly where we're going to, for something that you can take, be healthy, be not without the need to count calories all the time, and enjoy life while staying healthy. So I do believe that the future holds us a lot, and stay tuned. Look where we are and what we have accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Stay tuned. That's the final message for sure, because there's so much that you're doing here. And I mean, I'm, of course, especially fascinated about the obesity piece and the food addiction piece. I know my audience as well. But, you've got to start with, where you're starting. And I'm, keep me in the loop for sure on when you get into those clinical trials and more specific into that stuff. And if I can support in any way, of course. There's so much here. And I appreciate both of you so much for coming and taking the time out of your busy days to come and speak and share your knowledge. This has been absolutely incredible. I love learning about all these different options and these amazing things that are happening in the world. So thank you both for doing this work. I know it's not easy. And it takes a lot.
Thank you for your leadership, Danny.
Yes. Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you both again so much. And of course, everybody listening, thanks for tuning into another episode. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning into another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.